Welcome everyone to our April Earth Week Grid Talks, New Energy Axis, how to implement equity and community-centered clean energy solutions nationwide. It's really wonderful to have you all here. Grid Talks is our still relatively new webinar series that brings together leaders from around renewable energy fields and environmental justice movements to discuss clean energy access and community leadership and community solutions. We seek to amplify the voices of GRID's communities and really share the stories and experiences that are creating our mission impact and really advancing systemic change in what we do. So we're really fantastic to, it's really fantastic to have you here. My name is Andy Wyatt. I'm policy director and legal counsel with GRID Alternatives. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I've been with GRID for about 5 years, working on federal and state policy advocacy with the organization and its regions. Before I introduce our three panelists today, I wanted to get off first a few quick event logistics and also some context. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded and available later for you to rewatch over and over again when you can't get enough of what our panelists have to say, and also for those who are sadly unable to join us today. Your video and audio are automatically muted, but you can add to the chat, and please do, and ask questions also via the Q&A button. And please do, again, we will ask as many as we can collected from those inputs at the end of the session. So let's situate today's event around Earth Day and why we chose this topic specifically for this month. And Earth Day is an annual event celebrated on April 22nd to demonstrate support for environmental protection and increasingly environmental justice. So the first Earth Day was celebrated back on April 22nd, 1970. Apparently it remains the largest single day protest in human history. Which is kind of neat. So that first Earth Day achieved a rare political alignment, really enlisting support from across the political spectrum, across the economic spectrum, urban dwellers, rural farmers, business and labor leaders. And by the end of that year, the first Earth Day led to the creation of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of other really landmark, first of their kind environmental laws. To me, that kind of illustrates the sort of iterative back and forth where we have really important policy frameworks arising from and being shaped by the actions of people on the ground acting in community, and then people in communities then acting within and ideally being empowered by those policy frameworks. So today we take the opportunity to celebrate Earth Day and highlight the community-centered clean energy solutions that GRID leaders deploy daily in their work across the country, and that my colleagues in the GRID advocacy space push for in the policy field to advance environmental justice. So today we are lucky to have with us Arthur Bart-Williams, Executive Director of GRID Bay Area, Margaret Krall, Executive Director of GRID Colorado, and Paul Cleary, Executive Director of GRID San Diego. Unfortunately, Stacy Richardson had a last-minute conflict and can't join us. We will definitely miss her today, but the three panelists we have today have so much to say on today's topic about how we can implement equity-centered, community-centered clean energy solutions. So I will finally ask the panelists to introduce yourselves a little further and briefly share how you got into the solar industry. Arthur, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Trying to find that mute button is always interesting. So thank you, Andy. My name is Arthur Bart-Williams. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And as you said, I'm the executive director for the Bay Area affiliate of GRID Alternatives. So a little bit about me. So some folks sometimes detect a bit of an accent. So before coming to the US, I came to the United States for college. I went to high school in Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa. And then, and even still now, power outages were a common occurrence. But that wasn't an excuse for my parents, who, if there was ever a doubt about my preparation for some exam or final, my mom in particular would wake me up, and it didn't matter if there was power or not. Right. So I still remember the smell of kerosene lantern along with my teenage resentment of being up at that hour. And since then, the impact of energy and economics have been on my mind, although it's been an interesting route to get here. So my background is civil engineering. I've done construction program and project management, and then was an entrepreneur for a while, and then had the opportunity to join GRID and really consider it a privilege. I will say I never imagined that decades later I'd be in California and experiencing rolling blackouts. So with all that, kind of front of mind, it really is just a great opportunity to be in a position to be able to impact that and be at the intersection of the environment and social and economic issues that we address.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Margaret, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Margaret Kroll. I'm the executive director for GRID Colorado, and I go by she, her pronouns. I will say I'm probably the newest member of this crew here of Gridlanders. I joined GRID in October of 2022. I actually do not have any background in solar or nonprofit, but I do have background. I was a bank president for 28 years and then an entrepreneur for the last 10, 11 years, but I'm passionate about social and environmental justice issues, job training, and solar has always been something that, coming from rural communities in Colorado, we were always looking at different alternatives of energy since we were on well water and had energy that was not always consistent. So we had lots of folks in solar. So I'm delighted to be here with GRID, and thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. So glad to have you here. And finally, Paul, we'd like to hear some more about you.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Clary. I'm the executive director of GRID San Diego. I use he, him pronouns. And I've actually been with GRID over 14 years. And like a lot of GRID folks, I learned my solar at GRID. My background was really in the nonprofit sector, a lot of fundraising, program design and evaluation, and I worked in public health. I worked for a museum, an anthropology museum, and I worked in human trafficking prevention. And really, when I started I kind of made the mistake of, at time actually, I had solar on my roof, and I had, made the mistake of sort of, not made the mistake, but I mentioned that in the interview thinking like, oh, this is how I'm, I got to show them that I love solar. And of course they started asking me questions about it and I had no idea how to answer. So I don't know if that helped me or hurt me, but yeah, like a lot of folks, I learned my solar at GRID, and it's been a great experience, great journey for me, and super happy to be here with you all today.
Thanks so much, Paul. Really great group of fabulous GRID executive directors here. I would love to start by asking each of you more about your region's key initiatives and goals for 2023. Again, really in line with the theme of this month's talk on implementing equitable and community-centered solutions, which is what you spend day in and day out on the workday doing. What are you proud of and what are you looking forward to? And we can go in any order, but Paul, you're still on screen, so maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think well, our bread and butter has been here in San Diego. Our bread and butter has been our single family program, right? For single family homeowners, and making those projects also classrooms on the roof, providing the job training, the hands-on experience that really we can help folks get into the clean energy industry and get into a well-paying job. And so that's still an important part of our work. Over the last few years, we've built our battery storage muscle on the residential side. So we've also added battery storage to our repertoire, especially with some of our tribal partners in the sort of backcountry and the outskirts of San Diego, and also working with local nonprofits and affordable housing developers to solarize those projects. And I think And we're still doing those sort of three main things. And then something new for this year that we're really excited about is we're rolling out in partnership with the local air board, Clean Cars for All, which is a scrap and replace rebate program. Basically, it offers a pretty generous rebate toward an EV or a hybrid vehicle in exchange for folks scrapping their old, very polluting cars, right? And so obviously we're really excited about that. And we're also excited about the idea that we want to roll that out in conjunction with our single family and our storage, our solar and storage work, and just be able to present sort of a comprehensive package to folks, comprehensive solution to folks, rather than sort of doing the one-offs here and there, just roll it out in a comprehensive way. So that's kind of what's going on in San Diego this year.
That's awesome, Paul. It's really great to hear how important and central partnerships are to the work that's being done, and how holistically you're looking at things. Margaret, would you like to tell us about some of the Colorado region's key initiatives and goals for this year?
Sure. As what Paul indicated, workforce training is really for us one of our primary key initiatives. And our whole focus is around being able to work exclusively with LMI communities and residents who are underrepresented, underemployed, or unemployed, and who face systemic barriers to full employment. So we really work with a very diverse group of training cohorts, and it's exciting to be able to have our cohorts put free solar on our low-income community family homes. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that we love doing, is being able to provide the job training as well as the free solar. And through the Colorado Energy Office and through their weatherization programs, we're able to really tap into complementing the weatherization work with providing the free solar. And I think one of the most important goals for Colorado has been able to really fight for a higher living wage and a stipend that we pay our trainees. And so one of the things Denver did here is they increased the minimum wage to $17.29, and we asked our funders and grantors to be able to offer that higher wage versus the minimum of 16 that was originally set. So I think those are some of the things that we do in Colorado, is to really focus on how do we try to be as competitive as possible, provide as much as we can from a training and resource standpoint, from being able to train them on basic tools, equipment, skills, to resume building, and being able to help provide them with employers to meet in the industry that are hiring, so that they can find rewarding long-term employment from multiple career paths, because the green energy career path, is not just installing solar, but it also allows the ability to learn and be in a pre-apprenticeship program for electricians. And in Colorado, electricians are very key with installing solar, and being able to provide different pathways for all of our trainees to be able to choose where they want to go and what best fits their skill set. So the job training workforce is really one of our most important key initiatives in 2023. And then, of course, installing the free solar for the families. So I'll stop at that for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margaret. Yeah, it's so important, not just who has access to clean energy, but who has access to the economic opportunities provided by this enormous transition that we're going through, and making sure that those are really family sustaining careers. So wonderful to hear about your work with Grid Colorado on that. Arthur, let's swing back to you. Can you share your region's key initiatives and what you're most looking forward to?
Sure. I'll just start with some of the things that we have been doing, and the regions are similar in that, do similar programs. In California, we have a program called DACSASH, which stands for Disadvantaged Communities Single Family Solar Homes. And that's been key to what we've been able to do. And but it does have some particularly unique requirements, both geographically as well as with the income qualifications. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of is how the team has been able to reach those clients. Being in the Bay Area with the cost of living and housing, I often say that it's like finding folks who own their homes and meet the income qualifications, like finding needles in a haystack. And then when you find them, you've got to develop the relationships with them so that there's a trust, because they get approached in all different ways for all kind of different things. And it really is a team effort, starting with our community engagement coordinators and the designers and our installation crew. Like, those relationships are really, really key. And I'm actually really proud and excited about how that has gone. In particular, recently with, and we may get to that, but the NEM3 net metering policy changes that have happened, that we'll see how those go. But we wanted to get as many people into the savings so they could get before that transition happens, and that's been just gone really, really well. But other things that we are working on that I'm excited about, similar to Paul, they're a little ahead, San Diego, in terms of battery integration, but we are looking forward to ramping up on that. We have our workforce development, which we're getting our the IBT 200 Installation Basics Training 200 program going. We've got a training center that's just about complete that is going to help formalize that. So those are all happenings. And then I know I don't want to take up all the time. Last thing I'll mention is maybe kind of a little more unique to our region. We have a very robust, what we call our clean mobility area. And that involves several things. It includes what Paul mentioned. We administer rebate programs for EV purchases for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, as well as for Peninsula Clean Energy. And along with that, we do installations for EV chargers, both on single family and multifamily. And then a more recent area for us is in the area of micromobility. So we've got a couple of pilots going for e-bike libraries with the City of Oakland and City of Berkeley, to encourage that type of transportation and give folks a way to really have access to it, and then eventually purchase, because there are other programs coming that will provide rebates for the purchase of those types of those vehicles.
Thank you, Arthur. So many exciting things happening across these regions and innovations. I would like to ask
Andy, can I pop in real quick?
Oh,
because
sure,
I wanted
yeah.
to add to that conversation that Arthur just brought up. It reminded me, I mean, that there's so many rebates that are happening, and I think that is something that, like, Grid Colorado as well manages a rebate for the Excel program. But in the state of Colorado's creating a rebate, and it's interesting to see how much is coming down the pipeline as far as ability, especially for our low to moderate income communities, to be able to access these additional funds where you could buy an electric vehicle and maybe combine it with your federal rebate, your state rebate, your local rebate, that car could become affordable now. So I think that is something that we should all be looking forward to, as the clean mobility movement and the electric vehicle movement is really starting to take off in the battery chargers. So I just wanted to add to that. So thank you, Arthur, for reminding me. I shouldn't forget that piece of the pie that we're also involved in Colorado.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much to look forward to, and I'll have a policy-centered question next, but before we get there, just kind of in anticipation of all these funds that are coming our way, coming communities' way, as Margaret mentioned, and other people have touched on, as organizations and communities and people situate themselves in this accelerating energy transition, can you speak to what some of the equitable and community centering clean energy strategies and best practices that you've drawn from your work really look like, and what some of the challenges are? And this can be at a kind of any level that you feel is most relevant to you, from interpersonal or organizational or other levels. And I'll just throw open the floor here, and whoever wants to jump in first can.
I'll go. So I actually forgot to mention, this is my third year with Grid. So I feel like I'm still on the learning curve of getting, with all that's got going on. But one of the things that I've gotten as our superpower, if you will, is community engagement, right? And that really starts with what I mentioned earlier, the folks on the ground, so to speak, and gaining the trust and really getting clear on what's needed. So that is I would definitely consider a best practice. And one example of that I found, been very impressed with, we're part of a winning team for the Transformative Climate Communities grant, which is put on by the Strategic Growth Council, which is a state agency in California. And the intent is to provide flexible funding to impact projects that are prioritized by the community. And the way I've just been impressed by the approach to engage the community from very early on and provide resources to actually have them coordinate and apply and learn before they even get to the actual projects themselves. So and they engage the community in a way that we facilitate it, and it really forces the communities to work together. Like we have to work, not that we had to, but we got an opportunity to work with other nonprofits and develop those relationships over a long period of time before we actually get to the work. So between those partnerships and the community engagement and working with the city, it's just been this really interesting collaboration. And another thing that I didn't mention that I'm actually looking forward to, because we're in the process right now, and we should start those implementations, installations later this year. And it's not just solar, it's plants, it's gardening, it's transportation, it's all the various things that really come together and impacting the community in a way that is wait, what is it? It's more than 1 + 1. You get way more than just the sum of the parts, is what I'm trying to say. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Arthur. Yeah, I have seen so much in Grid's work how much it's a best practice to find those win-wins that really reinforce each other and are, solving multiple problems and being more than the sum of their parts. Same question to Paul and Margaret. What are some strategies and best practices that you see in your work, or some challenges that you'd like to speak to?
Sure, I can pop in next. For me at the interpersonal level, since I'm very new to learning about solar and the work that we do here, it is really important to educate myself, educate others, to learn about the clean energy technologies, to be able to understand the importance of energy and equity, and really defining what are community-centered solutions, because I think that's really important as we talk about, what are some equitable community-centered clean energy strategies or solutions. It's really like, then what are we really defining that as? And then sharing that knowledge with friends, families, your colleagues everywhere, and to raise that awareness. And I think it's also important to just support local clean energy initiatives, identifying what's happening and then being out there and supporting those initiatives, especially anything focused around the equity and the community engagement piece. We've got an event in Grand Junction where the state of Colorado is rolling out for for the Hispanic community and Spanish speaking communities, specifically around electric vehicle education. So I think being aware of what's important and how do we communicate and educate. So going to where the community is to be able to teach and share, I think is a really important strategy.
Agreed. That's a great takeaway. Over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, I guess, kind of going back to a little bit about what Arthur said. For me, I think about inclusion and participation. A member of the team here in San Diego, he actually may or may not be in the audience today, but he's got a sticky note above his desk that says 100% means 100%. I think if we're going to achieve these 100% renewable goals, everybody has to be part of the solution. And it's, not just getting, the clean electrons delivered to their home because we built a solar garden instead of an LNG plant, but also, all the different solutions, right? The batteries to pair with the rooftop solar, EVs, and also to be able to participate in the clean energy economy in the terms of green jobs. And so basically all the different aspects. And ultimately, if that's going to happen, then those folks need to be, everybody needs to have a seat at the table to create the solutions that are going to get us to 100%. And, not just sitting at the table because, kind of going back to a little bit what Margaret said, not just sitting at the table because, the powers that be allowed them into the room, but actually there with the power to contribute and the knowledge and to be able to shape the future, their future really, as these policies are created. So, for me, I just think about participation and inclusion in the creating the policies. If we're going to get, if they're going to ultimately going to be, going to be successful.
That's such a great point. And if I could choose one takeaway, hopefully folks get more than one takeaway, but there's no shortcut past actually involving communities and having their leadership. It's just crucial. So I promised a policy-centered question because I am on the policy team. Before I ask my panelists about some of the policy impacts, I'm going to set the stage for our Grid Talks community so that folks are kind of on the same page. And I know there've been some questions about some of the recent federal and state and utility policies that are affecting people's engagement with energy. So I can, this is just my perspective from where I sit on how, federal and state policies or lack of policies, which is also a policy choice, really shape Grid's regional work for better or for worse, which is why Grid has a policy team to advocate for better on the basis of what we learn by doing. I hope folks are aware of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, the massive investment in clean energy that was enacted at the federal level last August and is in the process of rolling out this year. It really sets the stage for a more equitable transformation of our energy systems through billions with a B of dollars of incentives targeted specifically at low and moderate income and environmental justice communities. And that's a lot of money. Energy policy isn't just about money, though, of course, and states and territories and statehood lacking districts subject to taxation without representation are the primary regulators of energy generation and distribution. So states and those similarly situated entities have their own financial incentive structures like DAC/SASH and SOMA that have been mentioned. Some IRA funds or IRA funds are going to flow through states. And there's also policy aspects like permitting procedures, renewable portfolio standards, solar compensation frameworks for energy that goes back to the grid, like NEM that was just mentioned, net energy metering, so many other things. So with that, kind of very broad illustration of how things work, I'd love to get a sense from each of you about how policy decisions and frameworks affect your day-to-day work in either helping or not so much helping your ability to implement equity and community-centered clean energy solutions.
So I'll take
Margaret,
that
awesome.
one on.
Fabulous.
As far as initially, I'll start my thoughts around how policy is impacting our communities. And I think one of the things that's happening in Colorado that we're very mindful of, and it came in, I won't say under the wire of awareness of the impact to our low to moderate income communities, but our energy company just is doing the whole upgrade to the smart meters. And with the smart meters is coming in this time of use. And time of use is something that actually negatively impacts our community in the sense that it basically charges a higher rate for the time that the majority of our families are utilizing our energy. And so that is something that I think is really important from a policy standpoint, that our voices are heard around how a decision like that can be made, and it really impacts the pocketbook immediately. And what can we do as an organization and as a community to help educate our community that is all going to be impacted by that change in the state. And so it really is about how do we try to provide the right information so that families know what does this really mean, because in a typical household, we don't really think about when we use our energy, we just use it. And we need it when we need it. And we've already had escalating energy costs. And my concern is how this impacts our community in the future with rolling this out. So that's sort of a real policy change that's happening. And there's so much happening at the federal and state level. But when I think about some of the key ones that are happening that we know we can tangibly maybe impact for Colorado, that is, and our energy company is in multiple states across the United States. So it's not just in Colorado.
Both in the weeds and very impactful. So thanks for that great illustration. Who wants to jump in next? Arthur.
Oh, good. So I guess it really just starts with those who are most impacted by fossil fuel pollution and climate-induced disasters and high energy costs shouldn't be an afterthought, right? And the work that Grid's been able to do, I mean, in California, I think we've served like 15,000 families that are underserved, and that's a lot. There's still a lot to do, and I think the policies facilitate and hinder. Right? So I mentioned DAX before. It's obviously allowed us to do a lot of the work that we've been able to do, and it has its constraints. So it's, so we literally have instances where someone won't qualify because they're on the wrong side of the street, and they meet all the other conditions. So those can be frustrating when you see folks that have the need. But glass half full, it's helped a lot. We've also mentioned net metering, and that is the policy that has allowed customers to save money by sending excess energy that they produce back to the grid, and they get credits on their utility bill. And I think it was an incentive that allowed for the growth in solar that's happened in California. But now, after many years of deliberation, they're rolling out NEM 3, which actually just got rolled out officially end of last week. And with that now, it's reducing the credits that folks were getting on their bill, unless you pair it with storage. So to be determined how it's going to have the net impact is going to be, but for our customers now, it's as good as it is for the grid, it's an additional cost that's out of reach for the installation of storage to be able to benefit from the credits. So there's another, I think there's a bill pending. No, I think it's bill been passed. SCHIP is another pending, I don't call it program or funding or policy, but it needs to be funded, right? And that's waiting for, I think it's waiting for funding from Governor Newsom that's going to impact if we can actually continue the work that we've been doing to be able to add pair storage for the customers that we're approaching so that they can get the savings and have it be worth it. So it definitely has real on the ground impacts. And I think Grid is, so I just want to say thank you, Andy, because for all your efforts in really influencing these policies, not just initially, but then taking the feedback to tweak them, to make them better and work better for the clients that we serve. So yeah, I don't want to take up all the time. I'll stop there.
Yeah, as storage is the future, but we need a bridge to get there to make sure that it is not still just a premium product, and that the people who most need it have access to it. Energy metering decision is so often, those of us outside of California look at California and hope and follow quickly on your decisions, but I hope there's not a rush to make changes to net energy metering elsewhere where they have it, at least until we're further along on the way California is. Tough issues to navigate. With that, anything else to say on that question? Otherwise, I can keep things moving along. I know we're pretty much on track time-wise.
I was just going to say real quick, one of the things that I think has changed for the better is, you know, when California enacted its sort of first of a kind solar policy targeting folks living with low incomes, it was a tiny little carve out to a much larger program, right? It was a little sliver and it was sort of added on, right? And I think it was, you know, it was great because it was finally recognized, but it was sort of attached to a general market, bigger program, right? And I think we're not all the way there yet, but we have seen that mentality a little bit switch to say, like, let's focus, as Arthur said, as Margaret have said, you know, on the folks most impacted by the way that we've generated electricity up till now, and are most impacted in these, you know, from an environmental perspective. And let's focus the policy there, rather than making it kind of an afterthought, right? So it's moving in the right
Great
direction.
addition.
Still a little ways to go. Yeah.
Yeah, the things that Grid has been working on since the early 2000s, you feel
We're losing Andy. Well, while is she coming back? I guess I'm just going to add some thoughts while we wait for Andy's internet to reconnect on the policy. One of the things that I think communities can do, and that Colorado in Denver specifically has done, is they went to the voters with the climate action sustainability resolution, which allowed sales tax dollars basically to fund some of these solar projects and the job training, all focused on LMI communities and justice involved community members. And so with those approved tax dollars, it creates a sustainable source of revenue for programs such as Grid to be able to provide the free solar to the nonprofit organizations, or to be able to provide additional job training and those higher minimum wages, if you will. So I think when we look as communities, what can our communities do around impact? You know, that's another area that I think is an opportunity to really look at as sales tax dollars that might be able to be funded as a whole. And the taxpayers have approved it twice now. So happy to have you back, Andy.
Sorry about that. Thank you for filling in my brief internet absence with such excellent content. Before we dive into some Q&A, I would just love to conclude with y'all's thoughts on what opportunities there are for folks on this call or elsewhere to get involved in the great work you're doing, and or to kind of bring the best practices and lessons that your work has really illustrated to where they are.
How about I kick it off with a fun one? We this year, San Diego we're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we're planning what we've sort of jokingly called a quinceañera. So stay tuned for that coming up later this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and love to see you there.
Quinceañera, I love that.
I'll go. So I think I'm going to put my development hat on for a second here, and I think that as a nonprofit, we do what we do. You know, we're fortunate to have incentive programs, but we generally there are gaps to be filled, and we have partnerships. We have corporate partnerships. We have individual donors that donate, and all that makes such a huge difference. We have grants that we have foundation grants, so that part of it is just key to what we do. So I think anytime folks have anything that they can offer in terms of contributions or connections to sources that can help us in what we're doing, because I joke with my friends, it's an impossible mission, but we're doing it. So we appreciate the support. And then the last thing I'll mention is I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago, United Nations Association panel for Electrify Everything, and there was an app they promoted that I was blown away by, called Climate Action Now. That really is about crowdsourcing, getting your local representatives to act. And so they have a list of actions that you can just review and with a click support, and it sends notes to the various representatives on to hear your voice. So just a quick plug for that because it was impressive to me.
Thanks. I can say I'm very glad that we're recording this webinar because there's so many things that I want to go back and take more detailed notes on when I'm not moderating. Thanks to all of you. Anything else on that? We do have some good audience questions.
Well, I'll just sort of add my call to action as well. I think in order to continue the great work that GRID does is just continue to spread the message around who we are, what we do, and then reach out on how can you support, whether you're in Colorado or in California or nationwide. There is, as everybody said, lots to do and lots of opportunity, and yes, and we are the largest nonprofit free solar provider and job trainer in the United States, and that's something to be very proud of. And we're very mission oriented and mission focused around the communities that we serve. So
I concur. It's sharing success stories is a really important part. People are so hungry for hope and ways to be engaged in our intersecting climate, health, ecological ways. Is great. We have a question from to start with. How do you see the newly passed IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law impacting community projects? I think my internet squicked a little bit there, so even though I can talk about IRA for hours and I will throw it to the panel.
So just to general, the IRA Act is new for everyone. Everyone's trying to figure this out, and some of the key points about IRA is there's a huge tax credit around these large community scale, utility scale projects for job training, in the sense that if you can hire someone and you must provide a prevailing wage, which is really where we want to go with all of our community members, is how do we get our community members to get that prevailing wage, the much higher wage than what is currently happening in a lot of the communities. They get a 30% tax credit, and so there's a lot happening there that I think there's still a lot to be uncovered on what that really, even when I talk with employers, they're really still not quite sure all the nuances of it, because it's like, oh, well, to have a master electrician, and then you have to have so many apprentices, and there's just so much detail that's happening around that I think we're all still trying to learn. And then, of course, we have what's happening even in Washington, D.C. around the whole budget. There's things already coming from that about how do we reduce, some of what has been already approved. And I would say I don't know the answer to that question, because it's very complex, and I don't think it takes a whole different, I think, webinar to address some of the policy around IRA and what's happening at the federal level.
Yeah, we hope that it survives these debt ceiling negotiations. Other thoughts on the recent federal opportunities impacting community projects?
I'll just mention, I'm usually pretty optimistic, but in this case, I'm going to flip and just say, I hope it impacts the communities. I hope it gets there. There's still a lot being worked out, and there's it feels like there's also a little bit of a gold rush attitude around it. And so if you have larger, well-resourced organizations who see the opportunity, they can swoop in, and before you know it, there's nothing left to get to where the impact was intended. So just a bit of hope and skepticism around it. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
And one last thing I'm going to just sort of add around the whole big infrastructure challenges around solar is, I think we have to look at just truly big systems, because there's so much in the pipeline in reading articles around large scale, utility scale solar that has to interconnect into a grid, frankly, that's may be outdated and not able to take in as much. And there is that sort of gold rush of all these large scale projects coming on, being built, but then they can't even interconnect. So then we're not even getting value for, so it's really interesting to see what's coming out in some of the current readings around these big projects. So I probably could open up a whole can of worms by saying that.
And I will just add on a positive note, because I have been in the same boat of waiting and wondering what this is going to look like and how it's going to, or if it's going to trickle down. And I think I had a very interesting conversation this week from a local jurisdiction. And it seems like at least a portion of this money is going to come in sort of a block grant form to different jurisdictions, cities and counties around the country. And they're asking, they were asking for our sort of our advice on what to do with this money and asking about programs that have worked. And so, yeah, I've been sort of fingers crossed, hopeful, and yet waiting and waiting and waiting. And that was at least a positive sign that I think, a positive sign that some of this is going to get where it needs to go. Now, will it have enough zeros on the end? I guess there probably never will be, but hopefully it'll have a few zeros on the end that we can really make a difference where it's needed.
Yeah, the future is still ours to help determine. I have a question from Athena about what ways does Grid Alternatives consider job quality when connecting training participants to employment, and is Grid doing policy work to raise the bar for job quality in the solar industry? I'll jump in on the policy side and say absolutely. We work with industry associations and others in this space with a very concerted focus on raising the bar for job quality, both in terms of it being a robust family sustaining career path that you can really kind of take lots of places, and that inclusive, which involves all sorts of details. You can't just from hiring to promotion to just all sorts of practices that the industry needs to be better at, frankly, a lot better at, to make sure that populations that are still underrepresented can really kind of be included. So those are policy advocacy pieces, and I'll throw it to the panel on the nuts and bolts of connecting trainings to employment.
So I can share just from Colorado, the one of the things that's really important for us to have that employer connection and feedback. So when they hire one of our employees, it really is about following their journey in their career pathway, and also encouraging that the employer provides additional ongoing support of additional training that's available. And so, the skills training that we provide, I'm very proud of what we do in Colorado, in the sense that the feedback from our employers are like, we are hiring more skilled labor from Grid than we've ever received. And that's kudos, because we provide them certifications, whether it's the NABCEP certification, whether, they get the OSHA, they get the safety, first aid. So we are very cognizant of how do we make sure our graduates have the highest level of skills possible so that they can be successful in what they're doing.
I mentioned earlier the IBT 200 installation basis 300 that we are trying to wrap up on. And there are other regions that are well established in Central Valley and North Valley in particular. So shout out to them. And I've heard some really great stories about the cohorts that they go through, develop, and the curriculum is just amazing. So such that then they have a showcase where the employers come and watch them in action, and then literally it's like a sports scouting event, right? Where not long after, the employees are getting calls from prospective employers and offering them jobs after seeing them in action. And I think that speaks volumes, the quality of the curriculum, the training, and then the results. So some really heartwarming stories that I know of that we're looking forward to in our region.
And we're the only organization that provides real installs. So not only do they get the job training, they're actually on a roof. We put them on a residential build. We put them on a commercial build. So they're, you know, as a job trainer, they're getting that real life experience. So that, again, enhances that skill level when they come out of graduation.
I've seen those stories firsthand with the Grid Mid-Atlantic SolarWorks DC program that they implement with a couple of our local agencies out here, and it really is incredible. We're approaching time. I think we have room for one more question. I think we won't be able to get to all of the questions. There's been a really fantastic action in the Q&A, so please reach out afterwards if you'd like. But I'll just ask a question from Stuart, whose city is finishing up a community input process for a new business development plan that includes an office space tax to fund affordable housing and career ladder programs. And they're wondering, has GRID worked with cities or counties to use new construction as a pathway to solar installation job opportunities?
We don't actually have that particular experience in San Diego, but what I will say is I would, from the solar perspective, is to just build that in from the very beginning and find that partner. I think for, you know, I guess my comment would be like, we see a lot of beautiful new buildings that maybe weren't designed with solar in mind, and they're beautiful, and they're also challenging to really get the most out of the solar piece. So it's good that you're thinking about that up front. And I don't know, Arthur or Margaret, if you have any experience with new construction, but yeah, start from the beginning with that in mind.
I'll take this opportunity to mention a really great partner of ours, Habitat for Humanity, that we've been working with. And all of their projects, the least that I know of so far, have been new construction. So we're looking forward to more. We have not added workforce development to those projects yet, and that's just because I think, like I mentioned, we're trying to get ours up and running, and so that's hopefully, you know, going to be a great addition to that, because once we have those projects, then it's easy to add the trainees as part of the experience. But that's our experience.
Fantastic. See, we've got 2 minutes left, and I think I have about 30 seconds of closing reminders. So would anyone like to, I'd like to hear if you have kind of one or two takeaways on the theme of today's GRID talks about implementing equity and community-centered clean energy solutions nationwide. What are your kind of top two snippets?
Well, so I've already acknowledged you, but I think it just really just underlined the importance of policy for all of this to happen. And it's a continuous it's a continuous process, because because what you get can get taken away, or you know, and even before you get it. So it's the persistence that's required is something that I wouldn't have had an appreciation for before coming into GRID. So that's probably one of my big takeaways here. Just that this does not just happen accidentally.
Policy is for everyone, but thank you. It is never ending. You can't count on your wins. That's always a fight, but we do press forward. Margaret?
I think a takeaway for me, as far as what we could do as an organization and to help nationwide the communities that we serve, is really being able to take our program to other communities that need it and want it, and in the sense of we can license out, if you will, our training. And that's something I know our organization is looking at. How do we scale nationwide the IBT installation basics training so that we can go into our low to moderate income communities, our underrepresented, underemployed, all those communities that we work with, and be able to provide this training curriculum because it's proven now. We've done years of training, we know it works, and then be able to provide some skills, reskilling and new skills for the labor force. So I think that's a really huge opportunity for us.
Thanks. Paul, you've got like 10 seconds.
I guess we're really focused right now locally on volunteerism and really harnessing you all in the audience, right? And it's where Grid started, and we paused it, time out during the pandemic, and how do we get that back and bring that energy back? Because it's crucial to our success.
Thanks. Thank you all so much for coming to this month's Grid Talks. I really appreciate everyone's engagement. You'll be receiving an email this week that'll have a recording of today's webinar, as well as a link to sign up for Grid's newsletter, which I strongly recommend, and a survey. You are the Grid Talks community, and so we want to be community-led in all that we do. So we'd love your feedback on what topics you'd like us to include in the future. Please keep an eye out for the details of next month's Grid Talks, which will feature some of our other regional executives and center around the exciting and very crucial topics of restorative justice and more on workforce development. So thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our comms team in the background today. Have a wonderful day, weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.